Hey y'all, today we have a friend of the show, been on many times before, at least a couple that I can remember offhand, but it's Omar Ruiz, who's been a reporter since 2006, started out in San Diego. Last time I saw Omar, he was in Washington interviewing Jalen Hurts right after the game, right before us crazed fans by the tunnel that he was running out of were yelling MVP. Omar was standing behind him with the great lights behind him and the smooth suit. Omar Ruiz, tell the people if I misstated anything.
Yeah, Matt. Well, I went to college at San Diego State, and started my career, in Syracuse, New York, and the rest is history. But I purposely framed that shot so you guys would be in the background. So, Jalen came off from greeting all the people he wanted to say hi to on Washington, dapping up, his teammates and everything. He was ready for our interview, but it was with an empty stadium in the background. I said, let's turn around because look at those crazed Eagles fans. A great backdrop. And so we turn around, and so sure enough, Jalen was awesome in his interview. And then he jogs into the tunnel like you've seen him do, and did the whole this thing, and our cameras were able to follow him right through it. It was just an awesome scene, awesome moment. And we did something similar week one. I interviewed Stephon Diggs after the Bills beat the Rams in that Thursday night opener, and Bills Mafia was out at SoFi Stadium in force, and it was the same thing where he came out from where he was going to be, and then we were just going to shoot it with the field in the background. I was like, no, let's turn around and make sure you can see all the crazy fans. Just great visuals there, and kind of represents I think what Washington was up against that day, and how many Eagles fans were there loud and proud. And I think that was like week 3 before yet we knew what sort of special season the Eagles were going to have. There were indicators that it could go that way, and I was an early believer, based on what they did. I think week 2 when they smashed Minnesota.
That's right.
And all that. But that was a good memory, and I'm glad you guys were as enthusiastic as you were and provided us with a good TV moment there.
Absolutely. They totally dominated that day. But then you fast forward from that time, the Commanders, rush all the way back into to playoff contention, including beating that Eagles team who dominated them that day, handing that Eagles team their first loss. And then they allow Carson Wentz to throw them out of the playoffs. I mean, what an amazing, turn of fates for them. I mean, do you think that they look back on this season, the Commanders, and say this season was a success? How are you thinking they're feeling in Ashburn, Virginia?
I think there's mixed emotions there, because I think it's easy to say, well, they should have let Taylor Heineke, play the entire year. The team obviously played much better when he was at quarterback, and obviously Carson Wentz, the turnovers just could not avoid him, whether it was early in the year, late in the year, last year, 2 years ago at this point. It's become obviously a concerning pattern if you're Carson Wentz or a team that employs him. But I think there were a couple different factors at play. Number one, Brian Robinson, his story, coming back from, getting shot right before the season, and how he was able to come back in 4 or 5 weeks, the inspirational, pull that had in the locker room. And not only the psychological effect, that he brought to the table, with his story, but the physicality with which he plays, the energy that he runs with, that can galvanize a team. So I think that coincided with Carson getting hurt and Taylor Heineke coming in. So Heineke was a beneficiary of that boost in morale, so to speak, for the Commanders. And then, obviously they got hot. That's still a defense that, while I think it still didn't reach its potential this year, is still very talented and can be dominant at times. And
absolutely,
obviously won a division for them a couple years ago, or when they were 7-9 and they got to the playoffs after the 2020 season. So there's still a bunch of pieces there that came together. But I think when you look at Taylor Heineke, he does have his limitations. And I think, they went back to Carson knowing that Carson's upside is still thought of so highly, probably above what he can actually deliver at this point in his career. Now, that's not to say that, if he was getting coached by Sean McVay or something,
Or Dougie P again.
Yeah, or Doug Peterson again, or maybe a Bill Belichick, with a proper offensive coordinator, or, just somebody who kind of, has that sort of winning culture attached to them, Pete Carroll, something like that, maybe they can get the best out of him, but by and large, I think he is what he is. So, I think they do see that position as a need of upgrade. Taylor, played well in spurts, but, he's shown his limitations, in a pretty large sample size at this point now. But if he's your backup, or maybe somebody who is in the room while you're developing a rookie or something like that, then that's a great luxury to have that probably won't cost you as much as a Carson Wentz might.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Talking about quarterbacks, is I've heard it thrown around that maybe Tua doesn't play again. I don't think that is actually what's going to happen, but are you hearing that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard, media people talk about it, but not necessarily anything from the Dolphins or Tua's camp at this point. I think obviously they're still at this point concerned getting him through this round of concussion protocol that, slipped through the cracks, while he was playing that day. It didn't register. And we've learned at this point that effects of a concussion can reveal itself a day or two later. And that's why they continue to monitor these things. But I think that's, priority number one is getting him through this and then see what that looks like. If the Dolphins made a magical run in the playoffs and he's cleared next week, then I think you have those conversations like, hey, Tua, can he play next week? And if it's not, if he's cleared and he doesn't feel comfortable playing, then it's like, well, when would you feel comfortable playing? And that's when you probably have to have that conversation of, do you play again? But I haven't heard anything along those lines other than just sort of literally taking it day by day at this point and getting him right, for the third time this season.
I think that it would be an all-time sports shocker. You could make so much money on if you had like Biff's Almanac and you said like, oh, the Dolphins are going to beat the Buffalo Bills this week after everything that's happened. It's kind of so distinct, such a small, distinct possibility. So we're really talking about Tua's future. And hopefully all the best to him, because, it's a violent sport and, you can't really coach concussions out other than, telling people how to tackle and how to get tackled.
Yeah.
It's a violent sport.
I think both of them, or the second two anyway, that it appeared that he suffered the concussions on, where he was getting tackled by the waist, and then it was the momentum and slamming his head onto the turf, whereas I think before, I think the main concern was, not lowering your head on a, attempted tackle, or even they've outlawed it, for a runner, even though they don't seem to call it as much, when the runner lowers his head, but that's why they put those rules in place. And like you said, it's a violent sport, number one, but the concussions he suffered is just kind of what happens almost every sack, sack, the quarterback's grabbed and he's yanked down. And obviously I think the studies have shown that when you get one concussion, you're more susceptible for another one, and so on and so on. I think that's why Steve Young ended up retiring, because, he had, a concussion or two, back to back. And I think that was enough for him. But obviously he was much later in his career and had already accomplished a Hall of Fame type of career and resume.
Absolutely.
But, different situation for Tua. Two lefty quarterbacks, I wonder if that has anything to do with, how they sit in the pocket or whatever. Just that thought came in.
Michael Vick took a beating. Michael Vick took a beating at the end of his career.
So it'll be interesting to follow, this case with Tua, and especially being so high profile, and especially with the fact that he played so well this year, and Mike McDaniel came and coached him up and all that. So, just hope he gets healthy relatively soon, and they can have those conversations about him playing again.
Absolutely. And hopefully he does get to, he gets to leave on his own volition. That nobody's hoping for that, but you do got to, the way his hands looked during the second concussion, that was scary stuff, much like we talk about with DeMar Hamlin.
Mm-hmm.
So best to Tua.
And that was the same field too. That brought those images up. And, I think I was on the air that last Monday when DeMar was hurt, and I kind of made that connection. And that was also where we saw Ryan Shazier go down.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like, man,
that place is cursed.
Mark Hamlin is like, man, those. But at the same time, I think the point I made was, and somebody else brought it up to my attention, was Antonio Brown's concussion when he got laid out by Vontaze Burfict. That was right. That was in Cincinnati as well. So, in other words, the staff there at Cincinnati, the ambulance, the EMTs, they're well versed, and including an incident this year with Tua, like we mentioned, in going into motion, these life-saving mechanisms, and I don't know if it helped, but it couldn't have not hurt.
Didn't hurt, right?
Putting those wheels into motion already in such recent memory.
So this year's upcoming off-season quarterbacks and available quarterbacks include people like Derek Carr, Tom Brady, Jimmy Garoppolo, potentially Lamar Jackson as well. Someone's got to go to the Jets. The Jets say that they're only a quarterback away. Who goes to the Jets to play in the Big Apple, or they play in New Jersey? But let's not act like who goes to the Big Apple?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're talking about the quarterback carousel. Up until yesterday, I thought maybe Jimmy Garoppolo might have been the best fit there, given his history with Mike LaFleur, and obviously he goes back with Saleh, but Saleh doesn't necessarily coach the offense like that. I think it's up for anybody at this point. I don't think they're going to give up on Zach Wilson. I think he'll be allowed to develop. I think they want to give him as much opportunity to succeed as possible. But just the Mike LaFleur situation was just so confusing to me because obviously Zach didn't play well, could have been much better, and there was all these things off the field that seemed to take away from his play as well. Okay, that's number one. But when Mike White was healthy, he played well enough for them to win.
He really did. He really did.
Contention and for LaFleur to kind of not get credit for that, and then they're working on a third string with Joe Flacco and everything like that. It's just an interesting organization to evaluate at this point and match with a quarterback, given that they don't have an offensive coordinator right now. And obviously Saleh is going to look for one, and they even mentioned they're also going to get like a veteran consultant type, part of the offense. That might help. And kind of once you get those jobs hired, then we'll have a better understanding. Okay, who's been in that system before? Who might have familiarity there? If they're not going to go ahead and commit to a redevelopment of Zach Wilson, if that comes into play in 2023.
So if my Eagles make it to the Super Bowl, which one of the three big three, we all know we're talking about in the AFC, which one of those should they hope that it is? I mean, they're all very tough teams. We're talking the Bengals, the Chiefs, and the Bills. Which one of them should the Eagles hope to get?
Golly, I think here's my prediction, and I don't know if you were going to ask me this later, but I'll say if the Bills get to the Super Bowl, I'm not picking them to get to the Super Bowl, but if they do, I think the wave of DeMar Hamlin and that emotion would just be a tough thing to overcome. So I don't think you want to play them in the Super Bowl. I don't think you want to play Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes after 2 weeks of preparation. And even though I love Joe Burrow and everything, just by default, I think you would, maybe the Bengals would, and if Bengals ever heard that, they'd can be completely disrespected and be fired up.
Well, you said it now, Omar. You did it.
No, I'll stand by it, but I think that would be your answer of the big three. But at the same time, they have all that experience. But I think just for those reasons I mentioned with the Bills and Chiefs, if you're asking me which of the three I'd rather play, it's Cincinnati. As much
It would be such
as I think they are, because I think I think Cincy, if Cincy and Buffalo both win this week, and I think Cincinnati goes to Buffalo and they beat them next week. That's my prediction.
Ooh.
And I think the Chiefs, the Bengals at home, like revenge from last year in the conference championship. But I just think, I don't know if, my wife, had a long cancer battle last year and is, just so emotionally draining and everything. And all those kind of emotions and thoughts came in last week when DeMar was down and kind of fighting for his life. And just, knowing all that, all that takes out of you, just from a human perspective. Mm-hmm. I just think at some point, as great as Sean McDermott is as a leader and fantastic head coach and as talented as they are, that at some point the humanity in them, there would be a letdown, an emotional letdown. It's like, they're running on fumes, they're running on emotion. And then it just, hits them, at that point. And so because of that, I just think, it'll hit them at some point. And the Bengals are just so good. Typically
they are.
Typically you see in the divisional matchup, you still have, like, for instance, in the NFC, you have the Eagles and Niners are dominant, right? And
that's right.
Of course, there's upsets here and there. But as far as like talent dominant teams, it's usually two. It's usually two teams. And like we all thought we saw them in the divisional last year with Cincinnati and Buffalo. Kansas City and Buffalo. And then everyone thought that Kansas City would walk all over Cincinnati in the final, like the Kansas City.
That's right.
Buffalo game was the AFC Championship. Usually there's thought to be two dominant. And so even you can play your best. One of these dominant teams cannot play their best in a divisional round and still get through. But I just think that against Cincinnati, Buffalo cannot afford to not play their best. And I think, because of that, Cincinnati is going to end up winning that game. But who knows? Like I said, if Buffalo rides the DeMar Hamlin wave, because he is doing so well and there is no more angst and anxiety and stress related to that, because he's just doing phenomenal and already back home. And if, maybe he's back in the building working out next week, and that's a boost for them. And they use all of that in a positive way. So, but just thinking sort of, relating that to the Bills and everything along those lines, it's a factor, whether it becomes a positive one or a negative one at some point. I think it will come into play. Now, again, like if they get to the Super Bowl, then for sure it's going to be a positive effect. But obviously remains to be seen.
So NFL named 7 teams, I think, as teams with under 4%. They your outfit. They went and did an analysis of the 7 teams, and the 7 teams who have under a 4% chance of winning the Super Bowl include the Jaguars, Chargers, Ravens, Dolphins, Vikings, Giants, and the Seahawks. Which one of those can you give me a realistic path to a Lombardi?
I would say of those that you just mentioned, the Chargers, because they have a talented quarterback, a team that is in the position that they're in as a 5 seed because they were hurt most of the year. Not to say that they would have caught Kansas City. They may have been a 5 seed regardless, just because Kansas City's so good, but they might have been like a Cowboys 5 seed where, they're pretty dominant second place divisional team that has the opportunity, especially with Joey Bosa coming back now and getting a couple games back under his belt, getting some rust off, to be the force that we all thought they might heading into the season. When they signed J.C. Jackson and got Khalil Mack, and we all thought, okay, this is one of the most talented teams in the NFL that could be a dark horse for the Super Bowl. Well, obviously J.C. Jackson has had his issues, but other guys have stepped up. They've yet to kind of be fully healthy, and just when they do, Mike Williams gets hurt. He's now questionable for this game on Saturday. But I think that's a team of those 7 that essentially have been given no shot to make a run that I'd say probably has the best to kind of come together at the right time to make, what seems to be an unlikely Super Bowl run.
Absolutely. I think honorable mention on the honorable mention. I guess I could dream up a scenario where the Minnesota Vikings win the Super Bowl too, but because they're so Jekyll and Hyde, they just put the bad team away for a few weeks.
Yeah, but they haven't done it all year, and to me that was when they had won the first 6 or 7. One score games, whatever. It's like, okay, they're kind of just getting lucky. But once it got up to like 11 or 12 one score wins, it's just that's who they are. Those are the kind of games you got to win in the playoffs. But then whenever they played somebody, that had a pretty good amount of talent, they got blown out. So it kind of makes you think that the Giants have a legit shot this weekend for sure.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. I'll tell you what I think about that game. But anybody in danger of getting the TCU treatment this weekend?
That Dolphins game, the Bills-Dolphins, as much as I talked about maybe the emotional roller coaster dipping for the Bills at some point, I don't think it happens this weekend. I think they're still riding high. DeMar's home. The news, all so positive in that regard. Miami gave it their very best shot a couple weeks ago when they were there on that Saturday night and still came up short. And and everybody played well. And now they're going with Skylar Thompson. And certainly not at their best, a little more banged up. I think that's a game that could kind of get away from Miami, given that, they've obviously fought hard and showed a lot of promise this year. That might be one where, okay, the Bills kind of show up, they play for 60 minutes and the score gets away from them.
Absolutely. I just don't, I talked to one of my buddies, Jeff Warren, I had on a couple of episodes ago, and he made the case that he doesn't think that the Dolphins will score at all. They score a touchdown at all. They'll kick field goals. Maybe they'll get 9 or 12 points, but they might not score. I mean, because they don't have Hill, they don't have Tua, they don't have Mostert either, correct?
Mostert's questionable. He has that thumb injury that I'm not sure if he's been ruled out yet, but yeah, he hasn't been practicing. So it's, even if he does play, it seems like he probably wouldn't be full strength. So
running backs with broken fingers.
Yeah. Boom. Try for that strip all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would agree with your buddy.
That's a ball security concern.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
But not to say that, Miami won't show up and give them heck like they did a few Saturday nights ago when they showed up and played them tough. But a game that could go sideways, would be that one if I'm looking at it objectively.
Absolutely. So let's get into this week's slate. Go in order of how people will watch them. Seattle is going to San Fran, and nobody's giving them a shot. I think that people think it's a runaway train. What say you?
Yeah, I think it would have been, but I think that forecast is going to be heavy downpours, obviously slow up the track and all that running after catchability for the 49ers. So I think Seattle has a better shot than I think I would have thought earlier in the week because of that. And, Pete Carroll and the Seahawks, have had such a great year that, I think they'll come in with a lot of confidence, a familiar opponent and everything. I think 49ers still win the game, but I think it'll be a lot closer than we might have thought initially because of the rain. Interesting take.
I like that. Bringing in the weather there. That's it always plays. That's why where are you since we're at this part of the discussion? Where are you on people who say that all stadiums should be indoors or retractable roofs? There's some people who say they should all, we should keep the elements, and people are all over the place. Where are you?
I'm like that. Keep the elements,
okay.
This is America's sport, that it's played in all different corners of the country and you play in those conditions. And when they're tough conditions, that's part of what makes football great, a great test of physical strength, but also mental strength to play in those environments. Now, I do still like the Super Bowl to be played in a place where the athletes can be at their best and not worry about conditions. But the road to get there absolutely should be played in the environments that might be tough. They're not always. You've seen playoff games at Green Bay where the weather's not an issue, but the fact that they could, we shouldn't shy away from that. Let's embrace it.
You think the Bills cover the 13 against the Dolphins?
Well, I can't really talk about that given where I work as far as that sort of thing.
Okay.
But I will say that's the game that has potential to be a big blowout if the Bills sort of get their number. In other words, early in the year when the game was in Miami, they lost a close one. It seemed like they ran out of gas. They were cramping up. It was so hot down in South Florida. Then the game was in Buffalo, and it was still cold, but the conditions were good otherwise. And they win a close one. I think maybe the pendulum keeps swinging to now it's potential for a blowout. So won't say one way or the other if they cover or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that has a potential for a blowout.
We talked about the Chargers having their path to the Super Bowl. Do they actually do it? Do they?
I don't think so. After I talked them up, I think the Jags. I think just like you, I kind of love Doug Peterson and kind of what he represents, and I think Trevor Lawrence has found his groove, and I think that's a team that just on all sides of the ball are playing with a lot of confidence, and I think it'll be rocking there in Duval on Saturday night, and what a raucous atmosphere, and I think they get one more win, finish off this magical season. Now I think they'll get their doors blown down by Kansas City next week, but I think they live for one more week of magic there.
Those guys, I got to give them credit. They are a year ahead at least. And that defense, that is as fast as the NFL defense you're going to see. I mean, from the linebacker position to the defensive tackles. I mean, it's hard to get big plays on the Jags because at every level, those guys are just so fast. Watch them, y'all. When you watch them play this week, those guys like no-name guys that you didn't even know like last year, Rashawn Jenkins, Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd, the new guy. I think where was he? Missouri? Was he a linebacker? Where was he out of? Utah. Okay. Utah, yeah. Excellent young players.
Josh Allen, it's fantastic. And here's something I learned about them, Matt, this week is they're still practicing full speed. Most teams at this point are just in walkthroughs and shells and just kind of taking it easy on their body. But Doug has them so bought in that the Jags are still practicing full speed. Wearing pads and doing that whole thing. They're a young team, so they continue to develop. That's why we saw so much improvement. They obviously Doug Peterson and the coaching staff had to develop all that trust after everything that Urban Meyer put them through last year. they earned the trust, and so he has complete buy-in now. So even though it's January, he's asking them to still practice 100% speed and everything like that. Nobody questions it. Everybody's all in. For all those young players that you just talked about, they're still getting better every day in practice. And when you kind of extrapolate that to next year, it's like, man, like you said, they're 1 year ahead. Imagine what they'll be next year.
We talked about the Vikings and Kirk Cousins and what they may do up there in Minnesota. What ends up happening against the Giants?
I think the Giants pull the upset. I think this is the one where the upset happens. The Giants. There's almost a mirror image of each other. They were one of those teams that, at least early in the year, they had those magical wins, and they were like 7-1 in one-score games or something. Yeah. And so I think that if it's tight, it's close. They'll play them tough. They did just a couple weeks ago when they met up there. And so I think this is one where the Giants are going to squeak it out, and that would probably be my one upset that I'd go with if you consider if you don't consider the Jags beating the Chargers at home an upset.
Yeah, and get ready. The memes are going to be out there if Kirk Cousins loses this game. that he can't win the big game is it's gonna be, and I'm not even a Vikings fan, of course, but it's gonna be unbearable. I mean, the internet will
Oh
that'll
yeah,
be trending for sure.
everybody be putting chains on him at that point,
But he's made his money. He has made a lot of money, y'all. Go check it out.
For him, man. Hey, it's all good.
He's done. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. He's a professional football player. I mean, people like to win Super Bowls too, but not everybody gets to win a Super Bowl or even get to the playoffs ever.
Yeah,
So,
he's worked it big time. That's for sure.
absolutely. Now the Sunday night football one. Some people have told me that they think that they'll be getting their jammies on. It's in Cincinnati. It's the Ravens. What are you thinking about that one?
I think it was all Bengals. I think I've talked up the Bengals. I believe in them. And I just think with the Ravens without Lamar, I think it's going to be similar to what we just saw this past Sunday where, Bengals really, there was really never anything in doubt about that game. Yeah, they kind of made it close at the end, but I think the Bengals will have no problem putting their foot on the gas and putting away the Ravens. And it's a shame because, obviously Lamar is one of the most electrifying players in the NFL. It would have been awesome to see this matchup, with Baltimore at full strength. But, because of that, I don't really think they have a shot to beat Cincinnati.
Does this injury situation help or hurt his ability to get a deal in Baltimore this year?
I don't think it goes either way. I think just,
okay.
Somebody's going to pay him big. Whether it's Baltimore or maybe New York, like you talked about, or maybe he goes back home with Miami and, after we monitor the Tua situation.
Wow.
But somebody
interesting.
Yeah. But somebody's going to pay him. And I don't think that once Dak got paid after he mangled his ankle, it kind of showed me that, the value of a franchise quarterback is, that market is always good, coming off an injury or not.
The thoughts of Lamar Jackson and Tyreek Hill on the same team were just, that's a highlight factory right there. Oh my goodness.
That would be crazy. That would be crazy. I'm curious to see how that all plays out this offseason. Obviously them slow playing that whole contract situation. I'm not sure I would imagine the ball's in Lamar's court at this point because he can just write it out and be a free agent, forcing them to put the franchise tag. And so it'll be interesting. He obviously was able to bet on himself this year, and so, is he willing to do it a couple more years with these franchise tags? And going back to your point about Kirk Cousins, if Kirk Cousins got what he got coming off a couple of franchise tags, imagine what Lamar Jackson would get after that. Woo-wee.
Kirk Cousins has done really well for himself. I mean, he's a professional and he's supposed to get paid for his talents. I mean, he's near a Pro Bowl quarterback. You roll him out there any Sunday. That's what you got to pay. People pay for the quarterback.
Yep.
What about the Monday Night Football? Cowboys and the Bucks. You got Tom and Dak in Tampa.
I think Cowboys are going to pull it out. I think they are a very talented team. I think it's one where it was an ugly game. If you remember week 1 this year and Dak got hurt in that game.
17-3.
Yeah. I think 19-3 was the final. And, it was one of those ugly games, that we saw early in the season on prime time. But I think Dak, is now healthy. I think he'll take care of the football. And I just think they just have so much more talent than Tampa right now does. However, if Tampa does keep it close and it comes down fourth quarter and who has the ball, then, it's a different circumstance. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think Dallas will win convincingly and they'll get their act together. Dak will take care of the football, like I said, and that defense will show up in a big way.
Omar, where can we watch you this week leading up to the big game next week? All that. What are you working on?
Well, we got NFL Now tomorrow. I'll be on at 1:00 Eastern on Friday, setting everything up for the weekend's games. And then Monday after the game, I'll be on NFL Game Day Final in studio for all your post-game coverage of Buccaneers Cowboys, as well as putting a bow on the rest of the Super Wildcard weekend. So, and then we'll start to look ahead at the divisional matchup. So I know Eagles fans will be looking forward to that one.
We will. We will be. We'll be in close proximity if the listeners haven't heard.
Well, and if San Francisco wins, and Minnesota wins, then you'll know Monday night that the winner of that game will be going to Philly. So will you get Tom Brady? Will you get Dak Prescott and the rival Cowboys? It should be intriguing one way or the other.
I personally vote to get the Cowboys. I don't want to see Tom.
Woo! I know you don't want to see Tom, but you have a chance for revenge after last year. Number one,
we beat them, but that one's just too close. I think Philly. I think the Dak and them come to Philly. Dak's not at the most. His morale isn't at sky high right now, and I think getting back all our guys, getting Lane Johnson back, getting Josh Sweat back, Avonte Maddox, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Dallas Goedert. These are guys, major contributors who haven't been able to be on the field in weeks. Damn near Pro Bowl players, and I think that it'd be a lot of fun.
Well, I think
Lincoln Financial Field.
That's a good point you make about the Eagles. I think they were so dominant early on, had a bunch of injuries, still managed to win the number one seed, and the Niners having won 10 in a row, and and very much deserve it of all the praise that they've earned. But I think we've kind of slept on the Eagles, if that's even possible, knowing that they're getting all those guys back and the potential they have with all the promise they showed early in the year that they can get back to that. And golly, what an NFC Championship game that would be if you get the Eagles at full strength and the Niners at full strength. That would be one for you.
I would love it. And Brock Purdy looks just as good as Jimmy G.
Yeah,
Brock Purdy looks. I mean, he's nothing to sniff at. I mean, if the Eagles are thinking, well, we get Brock Purdy in Philly, we're going to roll over them. No, that's going to be a 30-27 football game.
Oh yeah,
either way.
Yeah,
even in Philly,
he's he won't be intimidated for sure, but I mean, when you got Fletcher Cox and all them guys coming down your throat, that's a different thing to talk about than anything else he might have seen. But that's why I thought it was a good test when they played. Who did they play the other day?
The Eagles?
No, the Niners.
The Cards.
Yeah, they played the Cards week 18. They played the Raiders week 17, and then in week 16. Oh, when they played Washington, I thought that was a good test for Purdy. Given that as talented as Washington's front is, that's probably going to be as close to the talent that he would face.
That's right.
In Philadelphia.
That's right.
And so, every test that I'm waiting for him to show that he's a rookie and show that he's a, 7th round pick and everything, he passes. It's like he had that injury going to Seattle on the short week for Thursday Night Football with the division on the line, hardly practiced that week. Never played a Thursday night football game before, so he doesn't know what it's like to prepare in that short window. And they win in Seattle, and then he faces, like I said, that talent in Washington. It doesn't play great, but plays well enough to win. And same thing against the Raiders, that came down to the wire. They didn't play great, but instead of kind of, folding or, kind of letting the frustration get to him, he hangs in there and they win in overtime. So all these different checkpoints that you want to see, for your quarterback, he keeps crossing them off. And there's no reason, I think anybody, including people in the Niners locker room, have lost any confidence in him because he keeps showing that every test he's able to handle.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said all season, even when they were 2-2, as soon as the season started, especially once they got Christian McCaffrey, that the 49ers are the biggest threat to the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC, bar none. The Eagles don't have to play down. The Eagles don't have to play their B- game, C+ game to lose that, which I think that they do have to play their B- game to lose to the Cowboys. Yeah. The Eagles could play their A game and lose to the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, no,
with all respect to my Eagles.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said, and I think it'll be they'll need the tune-up. That divisional round. If it ends up being a tune-up or a dogfight or whatever, they'll need that experience to get everybody back. Get them playing together so they can be at their best against San Francisco, because obviously the Niners kind of have gelled here the last several weeks, and they are at the best versions of themselves. And I think the Eagles, as good as they've been, obviously stumbled a little bit down the stretch and still need to kind of work their way back up into that upper echelon, and now they have everybody back to do it.
Can't wait to have Avonte Maddox back. Avonte Maddox will be back for the NFC Championship should the Birds get there. That's my son's favorite player. Got to meet him. Great guy. Great slot corner. Thank you so much for coming on, Omar. You all please subscribe and share with your friends. Go give my man Omar D. Ruiz on Twitter a follow, and go Birds, go whoever else you want to go watch this weekend. But the Birds won't be playing this weekend, so maybe I'll rescind that. I'll keep my Go Birds close to the vest.
All right, Matt. Thanks for having me, man. Always fun to talk to you.